because like
Hey, we're
it
live.
doesn't. We are live, but it doesn't like always start exactly when I hit the button. So
When you click the button. Nice.
yeah, like because I've gone back and looked at something that like we started saying because I was like, oh yeah, we're live, so let's go, and it was like halfway through something. Where did it
Nice.
go?
Fortunately, we don't have much of an audience,
Oh,
so it doesn't matter.
I know, right? That's one of the things that I like about what we're doing here is that like no one's really gonna watch this. It's just we're recording it
Nobody
for
wants this.
no. I bought a thing. Shh. I bought a thing.
That is definitely a thing.
It's a violin mute. So it sits on the bridge and it makes it so that you can
Okay,
practice in your apartment.
got it. And just like stops the strings from vibrating.
Pretty much,
Really?
yeah. Stops the strings from vibrating, and I guess maybe part of what transfers the sound, I'm not sure. If anyone were watching this, they could correct me, but no one is, so I'll just assume I'm
But they're
right.
not, so
Um,
works for me.
I think that like that little wood bridge thing that the strings rest
Uh-huh.
on maybe help transfer the sound into the case of the violin where it
Into the
reverberates.
soundboard,
Yeah,
which is the thing that actually vibrates to make this happen.
right. So I think it's like
So
that.
yeah,
And
fascinating.
I'm considering getting an electric violin because they have some for like $300, and I'm just learning
Right,
and
and then as long as you don't
practicing.
hook it
So
up, it works. I was gonna say, do
yeah,
I know that you play violin? Is that a thing I
no,
knew about you?
no,
Okay,
I was learning violin. I was learning violin before we
okay.
left, like 6 months before we left. I'd started taking lessons. I bought one and started
Oh,
taking lessons, and then I moved to Japan.
right.
So
Well, and had other things that you needed desperately to learn really quickly.
right, yeah.
You
So
kind of were spending all your XP on, like,
yeah,
on what I don't know if there's a word for it when you're like, okay, for the next like 6 boss fights, I'm just gonna put all of my XP into this one stat or
yeah.
skill or whatever. I don't know if there's a word for that, but
Is
that's what you were doing.
like power leveling a little bit, kind of.
Kind of.
Especially
I
because
mean, yeah, no, that sounds right.
yeah. Especially because as we grow up, as we like get older, like you get more XP per event. So like the lower level
Yes.
skills, you can power level those up a little bit faster.
Which is so cool. You're
Yeah.
just like, watch me do this thing. I'm gonna take one class and I'm gonna look so cool.
Yeah. Although I think there maybe I think maybe it's like a multi-class thing. So like if I've got like a whole lot of levels in like in programmer, then I can power level up my
Hmm.
Python really easily or my Lisp if I wanted to. But like if I have no
In
levels in programmer, I can't power level up anything regardless of how old I am. I have to start as a level 1 programmer.
in like in seventh C, like each you've got your skill, and then within that you've got sub skills. So if you've got like sailing, that includes like knowing where the sails go and understanding the lingo and being able to keep your balance on a rolling ship and whatever. So
Hmm.
then what you do is you allocate points to those skills, but what you roll then is a combination of that skill and your sub skill. So if you're like a level 5 programmer and you've got like super crazy stats in like C++ or whatever, but that's because you've got like 5 ranks in programming and like 5 ranks in C++, so you're rolling on a 10. But if you just buy that one dot in Python, you're already rolling 6 in Python because you're
Right.
doing programmer plus the Python.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a good model. I think there's a lot of things that work that way.
That's how Shadowrun works too. Like Shadowrun, I mean, obviously now you're not
It's
rolling
got
against, you're
some
rolling a
elements of
number of
it.
dice. So yeah, you roll
Right.
like your
But I
stat,
mean,
the stat that controls it plus like the I think Shadowrun might even have 3 layers on some weapons. it's
That's
like
possible.
I'm rolling my. I'm gonna get the stats wrong, but like we said, no one's watching to correct me. So like you roll
Which
like
is fantastic.
your agility, and then you roll your guns, and then you roll your like pistols or something, like, and you just get tons of dice.
I wonder if
Shadowrun's a
that's a
game that,
newer, because that's not how it worked when I was playing Shadowrun, but I
well,
think we were
I
running deliberately an old version of Shadowrun.
I could be remembering it incorrectly as well.
Well, whatever.
So
Anyway, I think that model has a lot of merit to it because there are things that transfer
yeah,
when learning some new skill, some related new skill.
yeah.
Um, and a lot of it seems to be arguing with the GM about what's a related skill. And you're like, no, no, this will totally transfer because of whatever. Like, yeah, I've been a nurse and now I'm a computer programmer, which means like I have a really good understanding of what users are looking for and of listening to what people need. So that should totally transfer.
Right. That'll help me like with requirements gathering.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be so much better at that. And so
Yeah.
you should give me a bonus for that. It's actually really interesting in our parkour class because
Wait, you're in a
like everybody
parkour
comes from different
class?
backgrounds. Yes.
That's so cool. I'm jealous.
It is way cool. I can now do rolls, except that I pulled a tricep in my left
Oh.
on my left side. So, and not three of them, not all three triceps, just one tricep. So I can still
Okay.
do handstands and I can still do planks, but I cannot draw a bow.
Oh.
Like this tricep is gone, which unfortunately is also the one that you use to make pressure while your arm is bent. So I can't do rolls on this side, but
Mm. Okay.
yeah. Um,
Nice.
where was I going with this? Oh yeah, we have like some people that can like have totally like done like rock climbing or whatever, so they're really good at some of these things. But like you ask them to walk down the floor pausing on each foot and they're just like can't do it.
They just fall over.
Um yeah, our assignment for this week
That's
is
so
to
weird.
practice balancing like kind of not on your whole foot but just like kind of up on the balls of your feet.
Uh-huh.
And Adam and I look at each other like we got this.
That's not an assignment. That's I think
Right?
as far as my mind and experience tells me, that's part of being human.
I know. I still have like the wear on my shoes. Like I have nothing on the heels. It's all on the ball of the foot. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
I got this.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm just like, yeah, no, this transfers. And then there's stuff that I'm just like, I thought that would transfer. It really didn't. Like the first class, we had to just crawl, like moving left leg, right arm, and then right leg, left arm. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I got this. I'm a dancer. I'm coordinated. I can coordinate all four limbs. No,
No.
it just doesn't happen. So,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
But
So
yeah, it's fantastic. We've had 3 classes. It's wonderful.
that's really cool. I'm excited for you guys.
Well, I'm excited about your violin lessons. So,
Yeah, well, I'm not doing lessons yet. I need to make sure that I'm actually practicing. But I have like all the books I brought with me, so, and the knowledge from the lessons I was taking. So, and there is a violin. There's like a music school like a mile and a half down the street from where we live. Apparently, that's got like a whole
nice.
bunch of stuff. So, I can take lessons there once I decide that I'm ready to go back into lessons.
That you're not so embarrassingly
Right.
bad that you can't even go to a teacher.
Right. More like once I've convinced myself that I actually can practice, to justify the cost of lessons.
It is cruel. Although some people, there's something to be said for I have a lesson on Monday and I'm going to just completely hate myself if I don't practice before that lesson. So
Yeah,
now I have incentive to practice.
that's
I'd
true.
like to say that's how it works with parkour, but it's not.
No. So I read, apparently, like 5 chapters.
Yeah, we got
Yeah,
stuff to talk about.
that's incredible.
So,
I didn't even realize that I'd read so many chapters. Like, I feel like I just picked the book up a couple times and read, and I'm like, well, I guess I only made it to chapter 41, but I started at chapter 37, so
right? So, that's not bad.
that's actually progress.
So, Lizzie and Jane get home, and Lydia leaves,
Hmm.
which I'm sure Mr. Bennet considers a massive improvement.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I like so there are a couple of things that I kind of noticed over these chapters. One is that Elizabeth feels a little bit smug about how Mr. Darcy proposed to her.
Yes, which is
Like
so funny.
like she was like, that is the most disgusting thing ever. But she's still occasionally just like, yeah, you know what? This would be different if I'd said yes. This, and no one knows this. No one understands this except me, but this is funny.
I really love their first like time at um
Lady
what's
Catherine?
it called at Rosings
Yeah.
after the proposal where Elizabeth's like, just imagine what would be happening right now if I had
Right.
said yes. And Darcy was like, so this is your niece, and Lady Catherine's like,
Stop it.
she would totally be like, no, that's not true.
She's like, you
I
know what?
decided.
I, above all people, know something about courtship and marriage, and I promise you, you're doing this wrong. You're doing something terribly wrong here, and I'm going to go into it just as soon as I pick my jaw up off the floor. Um,
So yeah, she is pretty smug about that.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Um,
and then Lady Catherine, she's like, after they left, she's like, oh, Darcy seems to feel the pain at leaving most acutely, more I think than last year. His attachment to Rosing certainly increases. I'm like,
because
yes,
that's
to
definitely what's going
Rosings.
on.
That is.
And Elizabeth is just like smiling and nodding.
She's like, yes, that's what it's about.
And then Lady Catherine is just so, where she's like, and Elizabeth's just like, it is not in my power to accept it.
Hmm.
My father cannot. You are all kindness, but I believe we must abide by our original plan.
Yeah,
I'm just like, how many times do I have to say no? You
yeah,
want to talk about people who don't understand that no means no?
right. Oh my gosh, that's like the subtext. It's like Pride and Prejudice, or a book about people who don't understand that the meaning of the word no.
It kind of is. To be honest, it's kind of people who don't understand, like, anything.
Right.
In the chapter when they're heading home, like Lydia and Kitty come out to meet them part way, and then they all ride home together, and
Hmm.
like I'm not even sitting in the carriage with them. I'm just reading Lydia's dialogue, and I'm almost like can't get through it.
Hmm.
She's just like na 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 na. I'm like, oh my god, shut up.
Yeah. I liked the when Elizabeth was like leaving, she was like leaving Charlotte. She's like, poor Charlotte. It was melancholy to leave her to such society, but she had chosen it with her eyes open. So it's sort of just
Well,
like,
and I mean that's true.
it's like, look, I hate to leave her alone with these people, but like this is her bed she made, so
Right. Well, and she did.
she
I
chose it.
also
She knew
just
what
in
she was
these
getting into.
like these chapters, I really enjoyed watching Elizabeth, as she says, tried to unite civility and truth. And Mr. Collins is like, Charlotte and I have but one mind and one way of thinking. And Elizabeth is like, when that is the case, it is very happy.
Yes.
Like, just.
Yeah.
And also, I believe that your marriage is happy. Or that I believe that you enjoy your marriage.
Yeah.
And she's just really careful. And then later she's talking to Wickham, and says something about Darcy improves um, with acquaintance, and Wickham gets like creeped out and is like, then he
Oh,
rallies and he's like, "Oh, does he get better at talking, or
yeah.
has he decided to be
He
civil?"
improves with it with I don't know, exposure or something. I highlighted it, but it's later on.
Yeah. Um, I think Mr. Darcy improves upon acquaintance,
There, yeah.
and indeed. And he says, "I dare not hope that he is improved in essentials." And Elizabeth says, "In essentials, I believe he is very much what he ever was." And of like everyone she ever talks to, Wickham catches like, maybe not the whole detail, but he's like, "What does that mean?"
Yeah.
Um,
What are you saying here?
right? But she's just very careful in her speech. And it's really amusing.
Yeah. It's fun to watch people like trying really hard to not offend somebody who they would more easily offend than not.
Right?
I liked speaking of offensive people, like what you going back to what you said about Lydia. Um
Oh.
so like there's a thing you mentioned last week where she was like, "We mean to treat you all, but you must lend us the money for we have just spent ours at the shop." And then like immediately
On a
after,
bonnet that she thinks is
right.
ugly.
She was like, "I do not think it is very pretty,
But I
but
might as well buy it as
why does
not.
not?" I'm like, "What?" And then she'll pull it to pieces as soon as she gets home and see if she can make it up any better. And I'm like, "You just bought a thing that was ugly, knowing that you're gonna take it apart and try to make it like why not just make your own at that point?
Right?
Just buy
Because
the
I want to
material."
buy something.
Ah. And like and it's like this looks terrible. May as well get it. Like she's not her family's not
Yeah,
that
that's
well off.
exactly. No. But she has no like understanding of consequence. And then like on the way home when she's like, "Jane will be quite an old maid soon, I declare. She is almost 3 and 20. How ashamed I should be of not being married before 3 and 20. Jane, it should be noted, is in this carriage
Right.
while she is saying this."
Right. Oh my gosh. And like 3 and 20, like she's 23 and then she's ashamed that her sister's not married and I'm like that's so weird in my world.
Yeah, and I mean in their world it was
In their world it
different,
was,
but
yeah. Like that'd be like getting married at 40 or something now, I think.
yeah,
40 is the new
but
23.
still, yes, we should get a shirt. Sell that shirt.
Yeah.
And
Oh my
then he
gosh.
talks and then after Lydia gets invited to Brighton, and Elizabeth is thinking, uh, never had she been so much disposed to pardon Mr. Darcy's interference. She's just looking at her family and being like,
Oh
you
gosh, I
know,
know it. I see it.
Mr. Darcy has a point.
Yeah. Like before she didn't really like she wasn't really conscious of it. But then Mr. Darcy points it out and she's like, "Oh, well, okay, yeah, he's kind of right." And now that she's back with her family, she's like, "Oh gosh, like I can't unsee it." There's
Yeah, Mr. Darcy is actually
like, oh gosh.
100%
They're
correct.
always like this too, aren't they? They actually are always
They
like
are.
this. Oh my gosh. It's
Yeah.
no wonder.
And my mother is the worst of them. Like you'd think the worst is Lydia, but it's not.
Oh my gosh. I have so here I have a headcanon. Sort of.
Okay.
The Jane Austen is drawing a parallel between Lydia and Mrs. Bennet. That
That
like
that makes a
either
ton of sense.
that Mrs. Bennet is like she's comparing them. Um let's see. Is it this one? Um because there are a couple of times where I think maybe it was just in like the last chapter in 41. Um, who's this? Oh, she says stupid stuff like, "My comfort is I am sure Jane will die of a broken heart, and then
Right?
Mr.
Yeah,
Bingley
I
will be
highlighted
sorry for
that
what he's
one.
done." And I'm like, "What?
Is that a
You?
comfort?
That's not a comfort."
Really?
And
I
then
also liked the one where I'm trying to find. Uh, she's talking to Elizabeth about Mr. and Mrs. Collins. She's like, I suppose they talk a lot about having Longbourn when your father is dead.
oh
And
yeah,
Elizabeth's like, actually, no. And she's like, well, it would have been strange if they had. I'm like, it was literally not 5 seconds ago
right.
that you
Well,
were confident they talk about it all the time.
right, and then she says they look upon it as quite their own. I dare say when that happened, and then uh, uh it says, "Well, if they can be easy with an estate that is not lawfully their own, so much the better. I should be ashamed of having one that was only entailed on me." And I'm like, "Well, entailed means that it's lawfully going to be
Lawfully
theirs.
theirs.
That's the
Yeah.
definition."
Whereas you would apparently be happy with one that was not lawfully, that had not been entailed to you and was not lawfully yours, but you managed to get by some other, like, just brute
Right.
force or whatever.
Well, and she's saying that it's not lawfully theirs, but like it is.
But that's actually what entailment means. Yeah,
Right.
I highlighted that one too.
Like she
I'm
just
like,
doesn't get it.
it's actually exact. Like she just redefines everything to
Yeah.
mean whatever she wants. Like in this case, she means that she has some kind of belief. Like she believes it is unjustly theirs. That
Right.
in a just world, the house would go to the girls. I'm not sure how you would divide it among 5 people
I
because Lydia
don't.
would like immediately sell her wing, and you'd be like, "But the rest of the house is still ours." And Lydia's like, "Don't care. Now I'm gonna buy 1,000 bonnets."
Right. Which
But anyway,
yeah.
assuming one could leave the house to the girls, Mrs. Bennet thinks that would be more just, and
Right.
therefore it is not lawful.
Like yeah, she
she's just
assumes that lawful is just whatever she thinks is
she wants.
just, which is not. That's not how law works. It's law is what everybody else
Right.
thinks how everyone else thinks should go in general, not
Right.
not how you individually thinks. That's not how the law works. And then,
Right.
but then, so in the next chapter, she said, they're like the younger girls are all like despairing because the soldiers are leaving, and like, their affectionate mother shared all their grief. She remembered what she herself had endured on a similar occasion 25 years ago. "I am sure," she said, "I cried for 2 days together when Colonel Miller's regiment went away. I thought I should have broken my heart." And I'm just like, but it's just like soldiers game. I'm like, yeah, sure, they're like hot soldiers, and you were like hoping to catch one or whatever. But okay,
But she's
also
so
like grow up. Realize
yeah.
how foolish you were at the time. Don't be like, oh my gosh, no, I totally know what you mean.
No, she's definitely like there's that line in The Great Gatsby about how Mr. Buchanan is one of those people who is so amazing at football in college that everything after like smacks of afterthought or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But basically it's like don't be one of those people. John Green was like, okay, those of you in high school may not realize that that was a burn, but that was a sick burn.
Yeah.
Don't be one of those people who peaks in high school because it's terrible, right?
Yeah.
And Mrs. Bennet is definitely one of those people. Like, if high school is the best years of your life, you're doing it wrong. And
Right.
Mrs. Bennet is definitely one of those people who, like, 16 to 20 were the best years of her life, and you're like,
Yeah, and I feel like Lydia might be her favorite. Or I mean, Jane obviously is her favorite, but like, because everyone loves Jane.
well, I mean,
But
she's very proud of having, like, Jane is very attractive and she's very proud of having such a beautiful daughter, but I
Right.
definitely, like, if you were if she were going to ask her to pick her best daughter, I think she would pick Jane. But if you're going to ask her to say, like, who do you want to hang out with today, she's going to pick Lydia again and again and again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then like she follows that whole segment up with, "If one could but go to Brighton," and I'm like, "Yes, Brighton. Brighton solves all of your problems. Let's go to
Well,
Brighton
but she
because
totally does.
that's where everything is going to be better, and our world is going to be so much better. A little sea bathing
Because
would set
there's,
me up forever."
yeah, it's just, because I'm trying to see if I can find it again, where it was talking, because she actually put it in a parallel with Lydia and Mrs. Bennet. Had Lydia and her mother known the substance of her conference with her father, their indignation would hardly have found expression.
Yeah.
That, like, those two are almost the same. And then she talks about, in Lydia's imagination, a visit to Brighton comprised every possibility of earthly happiness.
Yeah.
But she's doing that projecting, right? She saw,
Mm-hmm.
with the creative eye of fancy, the streets of that gay bathing place covered with officers, and herself the object of attention to tens and scores of them at present unknown, and all
Well,
the glories of the camp.
and
And
I
to
think
complete the view, herself seated beneath a tent, tenderly flirting with at least 6 officers at once.
yeah. I think the and I like how it was phrased, the Brighton comprised all of the, like, I don't know, I'm
Earthly
not at it,
happiness.
so all the earthly happiness or whatever, like
Yeah.
like because the comprised is one of those words that people like always get wrong, like it's one of the stereotypical things on those lists, but like it's not
Yes.
it's not that Brighton held all of those things. It's that the idea of Brighton was made up of all of those all of those
Yes.
things that you could want. So like
Yes.
it's not that she thought all those things were there. It's that when she saw Brighton, she saw like all of these things like that made up what she thought would happen if she got to go to Brighton. And it's, I don't know, maybe that's a subtle difference that only matters for like you and me, but
But that's okay. We're the only ones here.
who are, and yeah, so it like pretty much my wife just has to listen to me rant like this on like once a week, and that's all the harm that these videos will ever do.
Don't you guys have like a bedroom or someplace she could hang out?
Yeah, but her computer's right next to mine.
Oh, okay. But I mean, she has books. She has a DS. Like, it's her
Yeah,
choice to be on
yeah.
the computer. Is all I'm saying.
It is her choice to be on the computer right next to me, listening to me geek out about this book with you. But at the same time, well, she's like you could like read books in the bedroom or something, but like she just spent like 8 or 9 hours in the bedroom,
Well, okay.
so you want to get
Or she could like walk down to the rabbit cafe.
the Rabbit Cafe. That one's a bit of a train ride, but yeah, yeah. I think that listening to me talk like this amuses her, so that's really the real reason she comes in and listens.
That's that's good, actually, considering that
Considering that she
this is
married.
kind of your right, which means she's going to get a lot of this.
Yeah.
Like Charlotte, she entered this with her eyes open.
Yes, like Charlotte, she entered this with her eyes open. She said not that open.
But she had hung out with
think
you
a
for
little like
like
Charlotte. I
6
think
months
a
or
little-
something.
Oh yeah, no, we definitely had hung out a lot. So she saw me at Nerd Night.
Right. So, like, I know for a fact that she saw you being like this,
Yeah.
because that's the point of Nerd Night Out.
Yes.
All right. Anyway, back to I loved Wickham and Elizabeth parting with mutual civility and possibly a mutual desire of never meeting again.
Yeah. Let's see.
I have people that I have departed from in mutual civility and mutual desire of never meeting again.
Yeah. And then I think the last nail in the coffin for my theory that Jane Austen is drawing a parallel between Lydia and her mother is
Mm-hmm.
um where was I was just there. Maybe that was what you had just pointed out. Her sisters. Oh yeah, it was had she known her sister, what you just said. They could have been understood only by her mother, who might have felt nearly the same. Yeah, that's what you just said, so
But yeah, that kind of.
that's sort of like the other thing where I was like, wait a minute, hang on. I think Austen's doing a thing here.
Yeah, but I definitely think that's true. There's actually really good supportive for that in the next chapter, which we can talk about next week.
Yeah. And then
Um,
it's a little bit it was a little bit harsh reading earlier on. It says Lydia, her talking to her dad, Lydia will never be easy until she has exposed herself in some public place or other, and we can never expect her to do it with so little expense or inconvenience to her family as under the present circumstances. Oh, really? Because I know how
right.
this one goes.
Dun dun dun.
I'm like, well,
Well, and I was
that's a bit.
in kind of
That's
in
like
that
reverse
same.
foreshadowing.
Yeah, kind of
It's
is.
like ironic foreshadowing, I think.
And I would have been really tempted in that case, like, because she do. Um, if you were aware of the very great disadvantage to us all which must arise from the public notice of Lydia's unguarded and imprudent manner, which has already risen from it, I'm sure you would judge differently. And um, he's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, kind of brushes it off. I would actually
Mhm.
be really tempted to break break confidentiality here and
Yeah,
be like, so don't repeat this. I really can't. I'm really not supposed to share this, but it was Lydia that caused Mr. Bingley to not want to marry Jane.
yeah. It was like
And
Mom and
just
Lydia.
that much,
But then he did
right?
though say like um um where was it? Um where was it? He said something. Um Such squeamish youths as cannot bear to be connected with a little absurdity are not worth a regret. And then let me see the list
Which,
of pitiful fellows who have been kept aloof by Lydia's folly. And then it's like he's like I think he kind of almost gets it. Like he
right?
doesn't get that it's
But he's
Mr. Bingley
also
and Jane, but I think he kind of gets it, like the gist of what's going on and what's being said. And he's like, "Look, anyone who's going to be scared away because you've got a crazy sister, like that's like they're
okay, but
lost."
Lydia is not a little absurdity. Lydia is like,
Yeah,
I don't know what the SI unit for absurdity is, but it is like Terra of those units.
right. SI unit for absurdity should be like it should be something ridiculous to say like boinks, like teraboinks and gigaboinks.
Yeah, no, I like that. All right, teraboinks. Anyway, Lydia is not a little absurdity. Lydia is like teraboinks.
Right.
That should be the title of this episode.
Yeah. And then
Also,
Elizabeth she's just like, okay, you know what? Fine. Said my piece. She was confident of
right.
having performed her duty, and to fret over unavoidable evils or augment them by anxiety was no part of her disposition. Not true.
Well,
But that's
okay.
what she tells herself. She's like, I'm not like this. I'm the kind of person who lets this go instead of dwelling on it. So I'm going to stop dwelling on it.
Right. I'm over it. I'm over it.
It's not who I am. That's not what I'm like. I'm over this.
Right. Says the woman who until like what 2 weeks ago was like, I don't judge people. I don't prejudge people. I just see them as they are. I have very good discernment of character.
Yeah. Yes, of course she does. Oh yeah, and then here's another spot that I highlighted where Elizabeth is being smug, um, talking to Mr. Wickham. He says, and let's see, talking about his fear of with Lady Catherine. He says his fear of her has always operated when they were together, and a good deal is to be imputed to his wish of forwarding the match with Mr. Berg, which I am certain he has very much at heart. Elizabeth could not repress a smile at this.
Yes. She's like, yeah, I'm sure he does.
She's like, yes,
that's definitely...
That's absolutely what's going on.
Definitely what he was here to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then, like, stupid Lydia at the end. The clamorous happiness of Lydia herself in bidding farewell. Among that, the more gentle adieus of her sisters were uttered without being heard. She was so eager to say goodbye to everybody and be all emotional that she didn't actually hear any of them wish her well at all.
Yeah, which is just... There was so much that just was like, that's Lydia. That's Lydia.
Right, and with the previous
I also highlighted where they were talking about Mrs. Forster, who invited her to come along to Brighton, who was a very young woman, lately married. Because you're like, Mrs. Forster, you're kind of picturing someone like Mrs. Bennet's age, at least.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not. Like, she's a young woman, very recently married, so we're probably talking, I mean, possibly like 18 or something.
Right.
And very much like Lydia. And then what I highlighted was, out of their 3 months acquaintance, they had been intimate for 2.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's Lydia.
That's so Lydia.
Right? We could make a TV show.
Well, and then early on in back in chapter 39, when they're in the cart traveling or whatever, and Lydia's just talking about all the things that happened while Elizabeth and Jane were gone, and she's like, Kitty and me were to spend a day there, and Mrs. Forrester promised to have a little dance in the evening. By the by, Mrs. Forrester and me are such friends, and I'm just like,
yeah, that wasn't the part I just couldn't. I could hardly even read it.
And it's just like, oh my gosh. Like, she just sounds like the worst kind of, like, beach bimbo that you could imagine coming out of, like, 90s sitcoms.
Yes. I don't just... And I think the Lizzie Bennet Diaries did a good job of portraying that.
Yeah. I don't remember
just,
Mrs.
so
Forster in that
irritating.
one.
No, because I think... Because in modern day, a girl doesn't need an excuse to run off to Vegas with a man. Like, you don't have to get permission or a chaperone or something.
That's
the thing
true.
is, Mrs. Forrester's technically being married is qualified to be a chaperone, but is utterly unqualified to be a chaperone. That's kind of where this whole thing went to pot.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But yeah, that's... But then, okay, so...
and then they get home, and Lydia's like, oh, and we treated them to the best cold luncheon you can ever imagine. Like, she's already forgotten that it was paid for by Elizabeth and Jane.
Yeah.
Like, in her mind, they really did treat them. I'm sure that money never got paid back.
Oh, no. That money's never coming back.
Right? But in her mind, oh, yeah, we treated them to the best luncheon ever.
And then it's so telling. It's so telling. If you go back to like what I was saying, the connection of Mrs. Bennet and Lydia, to look at every single idiotic thing that Lydia does and be like, oh my gosh, their mom is like this. They grew up with this.
Yeah.
This is what their mom was like growing up.
Right. No, that's what they got modeled. Like, well, and you can totally see, like, Mrs. Bennett coming home and being like, I bought a new bonnet. It's hideous, but I thought, why not?
And I thought, why not? I can fix it. I can make it better.
Right. Right.
Which
You can totally see it.
which now, like, going back to the very beginning, when initially I remember I was like, oh my gosh, why is Mr. Bennett so mean to his wife? Like,
Because she's a moron.
and I'm like, oh,
And he
because
is-
she's Lydia.
And he cannot stand her. But
Oh my
divorce
goodness.
is not actually possible. Like, you
Right.
have to apply to the king to get
Yeah.
a divorce. So
It's not like a
you're
thing
just
you
kind of
can.
stuck.
Yeah,
I don't know if they have a king or a queen at this point in time.
I think it's a queen, Victoria.
Probably. I mean, out of the last 300
long
years,
time,
England has been ruled by a queen for like 200 of them. Let's see, 75 to 1817. List of English monarchs. Wikipedia is kind of amazing.
yeah. The internet is a wonderful place to be nowadays. Even more wonderful than it was like 5 years ago when it was like mind-openingly wonderful.
After the King's Speech came out, I started just like reading about monarchs on Wikipedia.
Nice.
Wait, you guys just like ended it. What are we doing? Oh, fine. After 1707, it's a list of British monarchs.
Oh, lovely.
Anyway, so, but it'll give you like the predecessor and the successor. So I just like started, like, I read about Bertie, and I read about, because I was looking at the movie and I'm like, wait, that little girl is the current Queen of England. That Elizabeth.
That's cool.
Like, holy cow. So I started at Bertie and I just like started clicking backwards to like the War of the Roses is where I ended up.
Nice.
So I actually know a lot more about the Kings of England than I might sometimes have. All right. William the Fourth was coronated in 1765, and he ruled until 1819. So almost exactly Jane Austen's life was
Okay.
under William the Fourth. So yeah, you
Yeah,
have to
so this
apply
would
to
have
the
been a
king.
king. Nice.
Yeah.
I
To
just
get
kind
a
of
divorce,
assumed
which-
that it was always.
I mean, Victoria reigned for 63 years. And then Edward, who was the father of the king at the start of the King's Speech, had like 20 years. The guy who was the king at the start of the King's Speech had like 30 years. His son had like half a year. And then the other son had, 30 years. And then Elizabeth has been another like 64 years. So between them, Elizabeth and Victoria constitute, 120 years out of the last 200?
Yeah.
So a queen is a good bet.
I honestly, like, you mentioned the King's Speech, but like, I knew that movie existed, but for some reason my brain was just like, no, England has been queens for like ever, and like there haven't been any kings in like hundreds of years. It's all been queens because you have like, because it's like, oh yeah, Elizabethan England and Victorian England, and now I know that there's a
Right?
queen
It's
now,
always
and so I'm
named
just like,
after.
it's always named after a queen. So I'm just like, oh yeah, it's just they always had queens forever, I guess.
I mean, that's not true. Like, the Edwardian period is totally a thing.
It is, but no one
Um,
talks about it.
But yeah, it's pretty much, we've been. And the thing
Edwardian.
is, like, if you make a list, if you started at 1800 500, let's say, and you made a list of like kings and queens, there's only 2 queens. It's a much longer list of kings.
Yeah, men don't
But
seem to do well on the
if you,
throne.
yeah, if you go by years, um, it's
In,
definitely all queens.
in both England and Game of Thrones, actually, men don't seem to do well. Well, women don't seem to do well on the throne in Game of Thrones either. But I haven't read the
That's
last
true. Well, I
book.
mean, Game of Thrones, just like War of the Roses, that's partly because kings are not like, what the royal family is today is just like, look, sit in this chair and look pretty and
Yes.
be someone we can cheer for.
Hmm.
When our wedding
Yes,
photographer
the,
is
the
English,
Emperor in Japan is like that too.
and said it's really fantastic because it gives you someone you can be just like proud of and cheer for and just be like unabashedly enthusiastic about, that is completely separate from the people running the country, which gives you just free license to utterly abuse the people who are actually running the country. And
Hmm.
so you can hate your politicians and love the royal family and not have any of that cognitive dissonance here
Yeah.
where you're like, well, you've got to be respectful of the president. Like the people who freaked out when Jon Stewart called Obama dude and yet at the same time believe that Obama is the Antichrist. And they're like, you have to respect the president even though he is evil. And in England, you don't have that. You can just like love the royal family, hate the politicians. We're golden.
Yeah.
But in Game of Thrones and in the War of the Roses, the king was like actually the head of the military and expected to go out there and lead the armies. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you're in a war-torn time, you're just like, you're screwed.
And if you have a queen, the queen is not expected to go and lead the
Not
military
expected
because she's
to.
a woman. So queens would tend
Right.
to have a longer lifespan.
And so if
Also,
you
just
can,
genetically, there's a trend that women live longer than men.
yeah, I mean, actually, because we're down, the difference in lifespan, if you don't smoke and grew up in a time you never had to participate in a war and are of a socioeconomic class where you don't have to do like coal mining or something,
Hmm.
then the difference in expected lifespan is down to like 2 years
Oh, wow.
between men
Okay.
and women.
Nice.
The thing is
Hence why
because
statistics is important to study. Because the
right,
average includes anyone
um,
who grew up in wars. Yeah.
right. Well, because yeah, the like our grandfathers first off went to World War II, so
Right.
a lot of them died at like 18. And then they breathed in like mustard gas and whatever, and just all kinds of things that lower your lifespan.
Hmm.
Um, and those that didn't picked up a smoking habit, which lowers your lifespan. And
Hmm.
then half of the ones who did, who survived all of that, came back and were like factory workers or coal miners or something. And
Hmm.
so the thing is, because 20 women and 1 man can repopulate the tribe, whereas 20 men and 1 woman, the tribe is dead. We have
Hmm.
always given men the whatever. If there is risk involved, it's the men's job. Coal mining, war, whatever. You guys have to take the risk
Right.
because I
Traditionally,
can
it's always
repopulate
been
the tribe.
exactly. Yeah.
And so, but as we are able to take those out, like let's let the drones take the risk. And we've still got like firefighters and police officers and whatever,
Hmm.
and military. And so it's still there, but once you
Yeah.
take all those factors out, the genetic difference is not that great.
Nice. The genetic
But
difference
yeah,
could be
Victoria
attributed
got
to men injuring themselves more growing up because they get in more fist fights or something like.
well, and there's also a cultural, like, you've seen the billboard that's like, 600,000 men will die of stubbornness this year, and underneath someone spray painted, no, we won't! Like, there's a cultural thing where you, like, CGP Grey and Brady were talking about this on the podcast the other day. Like, you don't say that, oh, I'm not feeling well, maybe I should go see a doctor, until you've got just like searing pain all through your torso, and then the doctor's like, well, we could have fixed this if you'd come to us 6 months ago. How long has it been hurting? And they're like, 2 years. But and so I think that's part of it. Like, there's no shame in Victoria being like, I would like to see a doctor today. Whereas, like, William Henry of Saxe-Meiningen is like, no, I'm fine, carry on. I think is a factor too. And I think it's still a factor to a certain extent, that more likely to die of, like, whatever, like, infection from a paper cut or something.
Oh my gosh. Every time like I hear people talking about like men and women differences and like ideas of like what women think men are like and what men think women are like, I'm reminded of the Wheel of Time, because that's what I'm reading right now, and it makes me so angry.
That's one of the big reasons I had to stop reading that series, was it was just so fixated on the whole, like, and I don't want to say like men are all going to die of an infected paper cut, because I know you are reasonably sensible.
Right.
And if it hurts for, some reasonable amount, like Brady's point is, you don't feel well and you go to the doctor and they're like, well, get rest, drink plenty of fluids, and call me if it's not better in 2 weeks. So you might as well just like stay home and drink fluids. And I get that. That's my opinion also. Yeah. But once it passes a point where you're like, maybe actually there's a problem here, go to the doctor. And I feel like you would do that. Right. But there is a tendency that is certainly big enough to cause a 2-year statistical difference.
Right. Certainly, I would be more willing to wait longer for myself than I would for someone else. Like if my wife got sick and she was like, like the flu or something, and it lasted like a couple days longer than the flu is supposed to, I'd be like, let's go to the hospital. I'll find somewhere. We'll take you to the doctor. We'll see, make sure that this isn't something we need to deal with. But for me, I'll be like, it's just a day or two longer. I'll probably start getting better in another day or two. So. But I give myself like, I'm like, okay, if I'm not better by next Wednesday, I'm going to go to the doctor.
Right, because if it went on a week after the flu was supposed to be better, you'd be like, yeah, okay, it's time. Right, that's the difference.
I wouldn't be like, no, I can still go. Just give me drugs. I'll keep going.
Right. It's like, no, we're gonna proceed.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, so TLDR, queens have ruled England for most of the last 200 years.
Okay. But this was written in a time when there was actually a king.
But coincidentally, the exact time of Jane Austen's life was precisely when there was a king.
That's awesome.
Who was the son of the George that was King George that lost the American colonies.
Nice.
The King George we rebelled against? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have all of these anecdotes of times when I'm like, oh yeah, no, that was totally a king in England at the time, and yet my brain still insists that it's only been queens forever.
Again, like, if you made a list of monarchs, it's mostly kings. But if you made a list of years, and you're like, 1801, 1802, 1803, your queen's year list would be a lot longer, and that's how you're going to do your probability, right? Yeah. If you pick a random year, odds of king versus queen, that's what you're going to go off of. And so, it's a better bet.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of statistics, and maybe we'll end after this, but because we're not talking about the book anymore. But I read, I don't remember what the name of the problem was, but it was a statistical problem. Basically, if you've got 3 options, one of which is good and the other 2 of which are bad, and you make a guess, like you guess randomly one of the 3, you got a 1 in 3 chance that you're going to be correct, right? So then, if you make a choice, and then the person giving you the choice removes one of the remaining 2 options, which you know to not be the good choice, and says, "Do you want to switch?"
Oh
Should
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
switch?
It's named like the name of the problem is named because it was a game show.
Yeah, it's
It
named
was
after the
hosted by this
host of the
one
game
dude,
show.
and it's named after the dude.
Yeah,
And therefore I never remember it.
right. And like
But yeah, it's one
everybody,
of those like crazy counterintuitive
right.
like
Everyone's like, "No, you it doesn't matter if you
Mythbusters
switch.
covered
It's the
it.
same it's the same thing." And I
It's
and I
50-50, right?
right, everyone assumes that it's that well it's like, "Well, it's 50-50, either the one I picked or the one that's left over." And I'm like, "No, it's not because." And the reason that people miss it, I think, and the reason that thing that finally clicked that helped me get it was that the thing that he's removing is something that was not a correct choice. And the one that you
Right.
picked, it doesn't, it still has a 1 in 3 chance that that one was correct. Whereas they've removed
Right.
one now. And
Right.
so, like, so now you're saying, okay, well, this one had a 1 in 3 chance, but this one actually has like a better chance because it has a higher likelihood that it is correct because they can't remove
Right.
the one that you picked.
The good one.
Right.
Right. They can't remove the one you good picked, and they can't remove the good one.
Right.
So
So the one that you picked doesn't get any
yeah.
better because you picked it when all of the options were on the field. The what helped me was they were like, if there's 100 doors or 100 options and only one of them is right, and you pick one randomly, and then they remove 98 other options,
Okay. Yeah,
right?
should you switch?
Should you
Hell
switch?
yeah.
Yes, you should switch because the odds that the one you picked
Definitely.
happens to be the right one is
Be the
very
right
low.
one?
But they've removed all but the one other option. You're like, you know what? That one actually, they out of 98 things they removed, that one has survived. So there's a very
We're
good
gonna go with
chance
that one.
that that one,
It's that one. That
yeah,
is, I had not thought about it expanded out to that because it like intuitively obvious at the 100 doors level
yeah. It at least it
where it
helps
just
to
seems
illustrate.
weird.
It helps to find the intuitively obvious thing anyway. Like I still had to
Right.
like figure it out a little in my head, but yeah, it definitely
That is
because
interesting.
like I don't know, there's got to be some sort of logical fallacy that we make of assuming that randomness is being like somehow fair or something like when
Yeah.
because it's like, oh, they just randomly removed another one, doesn't matter,
Well, but they, I mean, they
but it does
absolutely
matter,
tell you that they're removing a bad one. Like that
right?
is part of the rules of the game, and that matters a lot.
Right, and it matters a lot, but you're something in your brain doesn't want to click that like what they've removed is a bad one, which means that what's left is more likely to be good. And just because
Right.
they didn't remove yours doesn't mean that yours is good.
Well, there's also this attachment. Like they've done these studies with like they randomly assigned students to get mugs. Like just half the
Oh
class
yeah.
gets mugs. And then they're like, "So how much would you pay for this mug? If you didn't get a mug, how much would you pay for a mug?" And they're like, "I don't know, like whatever, $2." And they're like, "If you did get a mug, how much would you want to replace how much would you sell your mug for?" And they're like, I don't know, $5." And
Hmm.
you like, well, would you pay a little more than that? Well, I might pay 250. Would you take a little less than that? I might take 450. And when you talk them down to where they'll absolutely not budge, they're still like $2 apart
Hmm.
for a mug that they didn't own 15 seconds ago. Like,
Right.
but once it's yours, it is inherently more valuable. Like it
Right.
just is. It's mine, therefore it's more important. And I
Yeah.
I think some of that might come into play with the door. Like that's my door.
Yeah.
Therefore it's more likely to be valuable. It's
I
my
think
door.
I think there's to kind of just extend the like the ownership thing you were just saying. Like I've observed that in like trying to build up better habits for like practicing and like getting projects done and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
that the most difficult part of working on a project is starting it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like there's like a psychological comfort, I think, in like going with the flow, continuing along the current trajectory. And so
Yes.
if I have a mug, continuing to have a mug is valuable to me. I will go to efforts to make sure that that doesn't change. Whereas if I don't have a mug, who cares? I'm fine. I don't have one. Don't need
I
it.
don't need a mug.
I've been fine with it. Whereas if you have one, you're like, I don't, but this is mine. And I want to, it needs to be.
It's called the status quo bias.
There we go.
The current baseline is taken as a reference point, and any change from that baseline is perceived as a loss.
Right. And that is exactly why it's hard for me to like start practicing violin or like go and work on an indie game that I'm working on or start writing my book, because right now I'm sitting at my computer browsing Imager, and
Right.
in order to change from that involves
Takes like just that
effort.
much.
Like that change is perceived as unreasonably onerous.
Yeah. So David Saya does kind of gamification of running your own business is one of the things he's been working on. So he's got this form where you get points for working on stuff, and so you get 1 point for every 15 minutes you spend on a task, and also a full point just for starting the task. The first 15 minutes of the task are worth 2 points.
Nice.
Because it is that much harder than the second 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's basically how he kind of tricks his brain into it, is he just gives himself double points for the first 15 minutes of a project. Yeah.
Nice.
The other thing that you can use that on that I find fascinating is like when you're doing your to-do list and you're like, when I finish this thing, I'm going to go get, refill my tea or whatever, or I can take a break, or so you're going to, like, I'm going down the list and I'm like, okay, when I complete this report, I'm going to go get more tea. So complete that report, look at the next thing on the task list and say, what is the first step, right? The next thing on the task list is doing this analysis, and for that I need to pull up the data set. So open that folder and pull up the spreadsheet that contains the data on the computer, so that when I get back from getting tea, that spreadsheet is already open.
Yeah.
And it is amazing how much faster you can do stuff. It's just like, wow, that must have been a really hard opening of a spreadsheet if it makes that much difference for you.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
I experience that all the time though, like at work, because like my boss is like, he'll randomly come over and be like, hey, how are we doing on this one thing? Or, hey, can you look at this other project you had open like 2 months ago and like look up this one thing for me real quick? And I'm like, okay. And then like you experience like someone standing over your shoulder makes you an idiot. I don't think it's because of this person standing over your shoulder so much as they're asking you to do something you weren't planning on doing. So yes. I'm sitting here like, I open a folder and I'm like, where is the folder I'm looking for? What even folder am I looking for? What was I doing again? When you were just on your way to do it, because your brain is trying to go back to what you were already working on.
To the other thing, yes.
Or to not lose it.
Yeah, well, I'm at the very least trying to hold it. Yeah, like it's being stored in RAM. And if I let that, right, if you turn it off, if you put it away, then it's gone, because it's not written to disk. It's only exists in RAM.
Right.
And so sometimes I'll have to be like, hang on a sec and write. So that's the other thing I found. I have a project sheet that says like what we're trying to accomplish and what's the current strategy and what's the current tactical situation. And then it has a spot for a sticky note that says how to start. And what it says on the sticky note is something like open C/project/whatever and open this file. Like, not because I can't figure that out, but because it takes like 15 freaking minutes to do that. So it'll be like, open this file and see if account 4063827 is duplicated. because I knew when I stopped that that's what I was doing. I know when I come back tomorrow, I will not know that that's what I'm doing. So get it out of RAM, write it to disk so that you can pick back up again.
Yeah,
so sometimes they're like, can you look this up? And I'm like, hang on a second. I've got to write down like really stupid instructions to myself before I can do their thing.
When I leave work for the day in the middle of trying to find a bug or something, I usually like whatever source file I'm looking at, and like wherever I was looking at the moment, I leave like I write like tons of lines of comments and like a big paragraph being like, this is where you last were looking, and I think it has something to do with this, which means you should follow this other thing there, which is usually a simple check, but like it's just that's the next step. Because we tried this other thing and it wasn't this, so I think it might be related to this. Like I just have a big paragraph that I read first thing in the morning to get back on track.
Right. But you have to. I've actually started doing troubleshooting. I was laughing reading about Deadpool, who apparently has 2 different inner voices.
Two
but I've started doing my
an outer voice, so he's got 3 voices total.
And an outer voice. So, I do my troubleshooting with 2 different inner voices. And so in blue ink, I have the person asking the questions, and in black ink, I have the person answering the questions. So I'll be like, why is this observed problem? This account is duplicated in the data. And then I'll be like, okay, whatever the next the troubleshooting question. So is it duplicated 1 step earlier than that? And then the black inner voice answers, yes, it is, or no, it isn't. And that determines like, so what is the formula that is being used in the step that causes the duplication? And then be like, so are other accounts being whatever questions need to be answered in order to troubleshoot the problem. And so then when I leave work in the middle of the day, I just have a sticky, and so I end on that blue with the question so that I know, what do I need to do? What am I trying to figure out at this moment in time? And then when I come back, I just be like, I don't have to troubleshoot. I don't just start this big project. I just have to answer 1 question that I already have written down.
Yeah.
But it does kind of make me Deadpool.
Yeah.
Especially since I get kind of sarcastic with myself. I'll be like, I had one time, it's like, it's not including these orders. And I got down and I'm like, did you enter the wrong date range? And then Black had to be like, yeah.
So there's, I started looking. I didn't get the book or anything, but there's a book called Getting Things Done. It's like a self-help book.
I like GTD.
Okay, yeah. So it was I started reading about it because Ryan, I guess they watched at my old company. The engineering team watched like some YouTube videos about the process and how to do it and stuff like that.
Okay, sure.
And so I was talking to him, like I've been having kind of a hard time at work because like when I get projects that take a really long time to complete and have like a lot of detail and they're like really complicated and lots of threads going different places, like it's really frustrating and it makes it harder to concentrate, especially in an environment where there are people around talking and noise and open offices and crap like that. And so like I was just sort of like lamenting some of that with him. And he suggested looking into this, and that like and he also said I may well be doing some of it already, which to an extent I was.
Right.
But basically, like the notion that your brain is terrible at keeping track of what needs to be done, but it's really good at solving the problems and doing any one thing at a time.
Right.
But it's awful at remembering what needs to be done or anything like that. And so, like. The notion of anytime you think of anything at all that you want to do, write it down, and then you don't have to remember it.
Just write it down.
Just write it down in an inbox, and you don't have to remember it, and you can just keep going on with whatever you're doing and not worry or stress about whether or not you're going to remember something. And I'm like,
Yeah, and
yes.
that was where I got the whole, because he doesn't use those words, but it's definitely like the concept of storing things in RAM versus writing them to disk.
Yeah.
And he's basically like, when you store things in RAM, you are stressed out. If
Hmm.
you write them down, you don't get stressed out because you actually can see, like, you can't, your brain, your RAM is probably not good enough to actually look at a list of everything you need to do and actually be able to prioritize it. Like, you
Right.
don't have enough RAM to hold all of that in memory and also run the prioritization
Right.
process.
Well, the other thing is like your memory gets like fragmented the way that RAM would if you're trying to hold too much stuff
Yes.
in there. If you can't clear something out, you can't clean it up. So now you're trying to be like, okay, well, this piece of information is like part of it's over here and part of it's over here, and I have to keep track, have extra information about where the pieces are in my memory
How
in
to
order to
join them
access the whole
together,
thing and
right?
how they're connected. Whereas if you can just take a
Just
whole
freaking write it
huge
down.
chunks and write them down and forget about them, then you're just like, look, it's just right there. It's
Yes.
all right here. And then the other thing
Well,
you,
and then the other thing I
oh, the other,
discovered when
yeah,
I was doing, because I learned it when I started actually doing serious programming, like for reals for the first time in my life. Um, and I'm like, I've never planned out programs. It's because I've never written a program that needed planning out, and the CS teacher is always like, yeah, you have to do an outline and write out pseudocode, and I'm like, no, I don't. It's freaking hello world. But when you're doing real programming, sitting down and being like, here's what I need to do. And then when you have that written down and you know that the next step you can just look up so you can forget about it for right now, then basically like you have this program running that's like to-do.exe. And if you shut that down, you have so much more RAM for actually doing your freaking work.
hmm,
And I became so much smarter
yeah,
when I could write when I wrote it down, and then I'm like, oh, this is an easy problem. Look, I'm
yeah.
brilliant.
Like I do the same thing with in programming, like a similar sort of thing. Like if I'm starting to build a big class that's going to do stuff, every time I'm like, oh, it needs to do this, I just write a stupid little stub function that like aborts the
Oh,
program or
there you
returns
go.
an error. So like, and I'm like, okay, cool. I need a function that does this, and then like return error or whatever, so that if I ever try to
Right.
call it, I know that I haven't implemented it yet. Because that's the other thing is you have to
You go in
remember what you
special kind of error and
right.
be like, you haven't written this program yet, you moron.
Yeah, like
Error.
the Java language actually has, and I think C sharp probably because it's Java plus. Um, I think like actually has an exception that you can throw that is not yet implemented.
Hmm,
So
that's
like
kind of brilliant,
so you
actually.
can just literally be like, oh, I'm getting the not yet implemented exception when I call this function. I guess I should implement that. So you can write out
Right.
the structure and have a complete like everything is represented. Which, by the way, when they talk about alpha software, that's what they mean. Is that they mean all of the pieces of
Ah,
the application have been built and all the connections are there, but maybe things aren't fleshed
okay.
out yet.
But
And
maybe
then
we haven't actually.
yeah, and then beta software is like we think everything's built out yet, but we know it could still be like
But we're
refined
probably
better.
wrong.
Right. Yeah, there's probably
Right.
problems in there, but like everything functions and it does the thing it's supposed to do, we're pretty sure. And then you have release
Probably.
candidate when you're like, we
Maybe.
think everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. We're gonna check and see if there's any bugs. So like
Right.
the three that's what
That's interesting.
yeah. So
That's your
like
phases.
yeah, that's something that was fun like several years ago when I was looking up the different phases. I'm like, oh, that's what alpha means. It means that there's probably large chunks of this that don't work, but the functions all exist.
Right. They're there.
The functions are
That is
there. They
cool.
just
Yeah.
maybe don't do anything.
I got in the habit of when I'm like, oh, I need to make sure I do this, I wrote it on a sticky note and I'm going to slap it on my cabinet.
Nice.
Um, and so I've just got, and then I have a piece of my cabinet, like I have a ribbon that divides off a little section for things that have been completed. So I just
Nice.
like move the sticky note over here and then I end up with this like, and I'm not paying attention. Like on this side, I have them all laid out in order that I think I should write the code in.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I finish it, I just like smack it over there. So I end up with this like mural thing of just like sticky note on top of sticky note on top of sticky note in just like random order and orientation and whatever. So
Nice.
it's, I could probably sell it. It's probably like modern art.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, but
Except
that's
some of the sticky notes might have confidential information.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But that's partly why I was so proud about getting a violin mute, is because that's been on my list for like 3 or 4 days. Because I was like,
Right?
well,
And
I want
without
to practice
that,
violin, and like, what's the very next thing I need to do to practice violin? I need to get a mute so that I can practice in my apartment without irritating or informing
right?
other neighbors that I'm practicing. And so I wrote that down. I'm
Right.
like, things to do, get violin mute, and like, it's helped
Well,
me
and
pay
that's one of the
bills
big
this week.
things.
And
Yeah, of getting things done is don't write practice violin on your to-do list if you cannot currently practice violin. Like,
right.
if there is a prerequisite, write the prerequisite on your to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when I was trying to, like, looking at rebuilding my website, and I'm like, I need to know how people are finding my website. And to know that, I have to download my keyword search information from Google Analytics. And to do that, I have to actually get back into my Google Analytics account, which I have not accessed for 2 years. So step 1 is to log into Google Analytics, which
Right.
may be like an hour-long process. So write that on your to-do list.
Right. And then when you're done with that, like, figure out what the next thing is, and then you don't have to do it now. Just know what it is.
Right. That was where I fell down, because I'm like, yay, I'm in Google Analytics. And then I haven't done anything with it for a month because
Nice.
I didn't like put the next thing on the to-do list.
Yeah.
But I now have Google Analytics open in this other window so that when we finish here,
Nice.
it'll be here staring at me like, do something with this. So
Nice. Well, on that note, we probably haven't talked about Pride and Prejudice for the last half hour, so.
probably true. But hang on, give me a sec.
Okay.
But Pride and Prejudice is all about like thinking you are someone that you actually aren't. Like you can think about, I'm learning violin, but until you actually get the violin mute and start practicing, you are actually just Lydia saying, we treated them all to lunch, even though no such thing happened. And so learning to manage your time better can make you less like Lydia and more like post-proposal Elizabeth.
All right. When we were little, my brothers and I, we invented a term for when you bring a conversation back around.
Yeah.
We were like 12. We called it the boomarang badang-adang.
Nice! That could also be the name of this video.
So well done. What was the other one? I'm going to put both of those in comments. I want to remember them.
Oh, I don't even know.
Oh, someone's going to have to go back and watch it.
Well, good. We'll get a view.
Wherein we learn about the boomarang badang-adang. And also question.
Right. It was something about Lydia.
Oh, that's so Lydia? Was it that? No. There was a word. Oh,
No.
boinks. Boinks and teraboinks.
Boinks, teraboinks. That's what it was. That's what it was. They changed Google Analytics. Now I can't find anything. Content grouping?
Was boinks, was it the SI measurement for ridiculousness?
Absurdity.
Or absurdity, thank you.
How fascinating. I'm going to have to watch tutorial videos. I hate tutorial videos. Can I just say, one of the things I really like about the games you make is I don't have to go through tutorials. I like that part. I hate tutorials. All right, well then I'm going to sign off and go watch a tutorial video.
Okay, yeah, I really prefer written tutorials because I can skim them for pertinent information rather than having to listen to someone who sounds like every nerd you've ever imagined in his mother's basement being like, "Hi, so today I'm going to talk about this one thing. But first, I wanted to make an announcement that a few of you may have known that I had gallbladder surgery last week, which is why I haven't been posting for a few weeks, but I'm going to try and get back up on that now." And like it's
That is exactly the case. It's exactly what it's like.
and I'm just like, just get the tutorial. Just do the freaking tutorial.
That's all I want. I did not come here to learn about your gallbladder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay.
All right.
Bye.
Same time, same place next week.
Yep, I'm good for that.
All right.
There's a chance next week the weather is supposed to be really good, so I may want to cancel so that if Erin's feeling up to it, we can go do something like earlier in the day.
Go skiing or something.
No, it's supposed to be like 16 Celsius, which is like 70 or something. Like 70 degrees
I also
Fahrenheit
can't do next week.
Okay, cool.
Because, yeah, I have a thing. So,
Cool.
never mind. Next week, not.
Right. Next week is vacation week.
Pull that
or
out.
doing other things week.
Yeah, that.
All right, cool.
Okay, so I have to tell you this Ireland story, though. We were in, when we first got to Ireland, we were watching the news, the weather, and it had, like, numbers all over Ireland, the Ireland map. And they were, like, 17, 18, 16, 17, 18, 14, 15. And I was like trying to figure out what those numbers were because for whatever, I had not slept. Like it was 5 in the morning. And I had gotten the Celsius Fahrenheit converter mixed up. And I thought that 16 Celsius was below freezing. And I'm like, so I know it's not that, right? Is it rainfall? I mean, it rains a lot here, but 16 centimeters seems like a lot of rain in a day. So I finally leaned over to the guy and I'm like, excuse me, what are those numbers? And he's like, those are the temperatures. And I'm like, isn't 16 degrees really cold? And he's like, well, yes, it is, but it's supposed to warm up later in the week. And then, later, I realized I'd gotten my conversion backwards, and 16 degrees was, 70. And this Irish man, when I leaned over and was like, isn't 16 really cold? He was like, yes, it is. And I'm like, I'm definitely in a different country.
Was it summer?
It was August.
Okay, yeah, so that probably would have been cold for August. August, you'd probably expect temperatures more in, the 20s.
Right. Anyway, I was really amused.
Nice.
But anyway, enjoy your 16.
Okay.
And we shall meet again in a fortnight.
Excellent. In a fortnight. Bye.
Bye.